Hey guys, Vanny is a Craft Banger deck profile, so if you guys enjoyed, I'm telling you, subscribe and subscribe. This time we're covering DZ set 4 for Keter Sanctuary, and that is Hexaorb, or technically speaking, Hexaorb Aquamarine. So I feel like this is pretty appropriate considering today is August 10th at Saturday, 7:32 a.m. and yesterday was the match between Now and Senka, and her final line to Senka, or one of her final lines to Senka, was the Hexaorb's original flavor text. So I feel like it's appropriate that I'm recording this now. Anyways, Hexaorb was a deck I never really liked at the start of when Hexaorb first came out because it just didn't feel like my type of deck. It didn't really have multi-attack, which granted I always talk shit about the multi-attack buffs because every deck has it, but also because like it never really worked out with all the persona rides and trying to drive check triggers. And then Aquamarine came out, and then it actually feels like this fits my playstyle. And when I saw that Hexaorb got support this set, I was like, you know what, screw it, I'll shove it in. And I've never really been excited to shove in Hexaorb support, and honestly this deck was really fun building and is really fun getting to use. So let's go ahead and start out and see what we got. First today we have our energy generator. It's our ride deck crest. You remember ride deck crest in your ride deck, auto ride deck. When you ride, put this card into your crest. If you win second, energy charge 3, and then continues to have 10 energies a turn, and then auto begin your ride phase, energy charge 3, and then act once per turn, energy by 7 to draw a card. All around pretty solid because it gives you a free 3 energy every turn. If you go second, you get an extra 3 energy on top of that. This deck doesn't really have any energy users, if I'm remembering it correctly. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I mean, I haven't touched this deck in a week, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't have any energy users, and if it does, well, we'll figure that out as we go on. But if you don't have any energy users, that's a free energy boss 7 you can use every turn to draw a card, or every time you get the chance to draw a card, which can help increase your hand in terms of defensive power and offensive power you could have. So obviously this is our red deck crest. And we have our starter and Tri-Connect Sorceress. Grades will boost 5k shields, get base, auto roll pop in second, draw a card, standard starter, special phase, if you go second. You can really make this any starter you want. I just used to make a Tri-Connect Sorceress because, again, I typically like to run the canonical ride lines of the decks, and we'll Tri-Connect as the canonical starter of Hexaorb, regardless of its Aquamarine or OG, so obviously she's going to be here. I was really hoping that when we saw Now, like, going over her cards in episode 10, or not episode 10, in episode 6, 5, whatever the hell number it was, that she was gonna, I thought for a second she had a new Hexaorb rad line, but I could tell that it wasn't. Anyways, then we have our Overtrigger and Light Dragon Deity of Honors Armatinoa. Grades will boost 50k shield, 5k power, Overtrigger your deck. When it moves, add trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one moves, it gets plus from the turn. If you do during a draw check, activate its disfect widget until end of your turn. You can also perform draw checks for the battles you rear card attack. All around pretty solid because this deck can stack the deck a lot, so being able to know when you're going to see the over, if that happened either in the first game I played with this deck or the second game I played with this deck, and it was on camera too, then you can kind of take advantage of that and be able to guarantee if you're going to sack the over or not. And I always kind of blamed this deck for why I never sack Armatino, because if you don't know, I've never had good luck with Armatino. Like, he's the overtrigger I would sack the least by a long shot, and I always blamed Hexaorb for it because that seemed to happen after I started playing Hexaorb with it. But, you know, this deck, I still don't see Armatino often, but the fact that I still saw it within 2 games of playing this deck kind of makes me feel like I've trained my luck around with Armatino. And again, because you can deck stack, you can kind of guarantee when you're going to see triggers, so you can combo well by setting up like Aquamarine on Rearguard Circle if you have to, or even Octavote Sorceress, so you can get some extra drive checks from Armatino. Then we have our normal triggers. First up, we run 2 copies of Disma, White Fang Witch, grades will boost 50k shield, 5k power. She's a critical trigger, don't worry, we have more than just her. This can really be any crit you want though, because we have 4 more copies of Blade Feather over here. But you can really make Disma whoever. I just chose to make it Disma because she was technically the original crit that came out with Hexa, so I might as well. Then we have 2 draws and Protection Magic Proby, grades will boost 5k shield, 4k base, draw guard, circle punch, vanguards are great 3 guard, 5000 shield. Okay, the only reason I never really ran draws on my old Hexa builds is because the old Hexa really wanted to see crits or fronts, and while this deck still wants to see crits or fronts, it has a lot more leniency considering only 1 card here actually requires it to see a crit or the front in the drive check. So I have 2 draw triggers here for the extra defense, also because this deck almost turned into Alt Mile and Pure Accident, so 2 draws for that. Then we have 2 copies of Bard of Heavenly Song Alpac, grades will boost 50k shield, 4k power, or 3 copies I mean. Continues guard circle opponent's vanguards are good 3 guard, extra 5k shield, so you know 20k shield, nice to have just like Proby. Being able to add extra shield is very nice on defense, especially when this deck is supposed to be aggro. And seeing a front trigger, well, with a deck that can do 5 attacks, that's pretty good for number wise, especially because your first attacks are probably going to be your most weakest, especially if you're not expecting to see a front. But if you are expecting to see a front, because again, deck stacking, then you're good to go. Only have 4 more crits in Blade Feather Dragon, grades will boost 50k shield, 4k power, critical trigger on rear guard, and then the booster shove it to soul charger when you do for the turn. Okay, this deck does have a good amount of soul chargers, but if you get really unlucky and you don't see the one soul charger that is really good, you will end up into a soul problem one way or another, especially if you see the other card that does end up stacking the deck. So Blade Feather's here just as a precaution, but also because you're probably going to try to spam Hexaorb every single turn, and you want to use your Octavote Sorceress skill instead of soul charging to countercharge unless you absolutely have to soul charge. So 4 Blade Feather for the crit pressure, because it's a critical trigger, but also for soul purposes. That actually did come in helpful one time. And then 4 copies of Circling Sorceress, grade 0 boost, Vindicate Shield, 5k power, standing heal, and that's about it. You can really make a standing heal you want just to make a Circling Sorceress, because again, it came out with Hexaorb, and she's a sorceress, might as well have as many sorcerers as possible. I mean, yeah, the counter heal is also a sorceress, but I like all the other deck profiles. I don't really like running the counter heals too much. I feel like they're too situational where they're fluctuating 10 to 25k shield. I'd much rather have a consistent 15k shield, but again, you do you. But again, just to wrap up the trigger lineup, because it is a little bit out of order, we have 6 crits, 3 draws, 2 fronts, sorry, 2 draws, 3 fronts, 4 heals. On to our grade 1s, 4 copies of a card I literally didn't know existed until I put this deck together. Generous Flute Angel, who has become so incredibly useful to me and is now my favorite grade 1 in this deck. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto when placed on rearguard circle. If your Vanguard's a sorceress, ditch a card, check top 2, choose a card from among them, put it to your hand, and put the rest on at the top of your deck. The best part about this is, this literally just says if your Vanguard's a sorceress. Guess what the entire ride line is? Suddenly, you can now aggro the second you get to turn 1, and not to mention the fact you can add at least 1 card to hand. Well, you have to add something to hand. Sadly, there have been times where I've seen like double triggers off this, and then there have been games where I flipped 2 more Generous Flute Angels off top of this. Again, that is on camera, and then I called them to deck them for more triggers. Generous Flute Angels all around a very solid grade 1. It helps filter out the top few cards of your deck, and if you use other deck stackers before you use its skill, then you can kind of predetermine what you're going to add to your hand. And if you don't, it's a nice way to kick off your deck stacking abilities, since you don't necessarily know what's going to be there, so you can hopefully pull off some normal units. So 4 of Generous Flute Angel, really love it a lot, helps dig through the deck, literally can aggro at any point in the game, which is pretty solid. So 4 of. This part is, it can be placed by any means, so God forbid Bush ever gave us a way to do this, but if you found a way to superior call this while you were on grade 0, because the Vanguard is a sorceress, you can still use the ability because it can be called from anywhere. So 4 of Flute Angel. Then we have 4 copies of Hexagon Saturate Sorceress, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto when placed on the rearguard circle with Vanguard's a sorceress, counter boss 1, straight after 1, grade 3 with Hexaorb in the card name, reveal, put your hand, shuffle your deck. Okay, I really love this grade 1 because the Hexaorb did originally have a grade 1 that did the exact same thing, but specifically it searched for Hexaorb Sorceress, meaning it could not search for, you know, Aquamarine, because Aquamarine only counts as Hexaorb Sorceress when on the Vanguard circle, but on the bright side, this literally does almost the exact same thing, but better, because that one also had to force you to be at grade 3. This one, again, thanks to Generous Flute, you can do it at any point in the game as long as you have CB for it, which is pretty solid, and not to mention the fact that she can search any Hexaorb, so if you want to shove an OG Hexaorb in this deck, for the record she is not, but if you want to, you could, and then when you get to grade 3, instead of riding from ride deck with Aquamarine, if you feel like OG Hexaorb is more appropriate, I don't know why I keep calling it appropriate, but it's appropriate, you can pick either or to ride. Either way though, it's a very good grade 1. I do like it a lot, and it is the reason why I actually built this deck. I wanted an excuse to touch Hexaorb again, and this gave me it. I don't run the new grade 2, but hey, this deck is a lot different than the previous build, so it's a good enough deck profile for me to make so 4 of Hexagon Saturate. Just a very good grade 1, procs at any stage of the game. It's just very nice to have. Then we have 4 copies of RPG and Aegis Meyer Dragon. Grade 1 boost, 0 so okay, base continuous sentinel. You have 4 sentinels in the deck. I'll play a guard circle, choose 1 views. It cannot be hit in the battle. Every hand has 2 more cards in it. Choose a card from your hand, guard is standing PG, nothing special effects. It means if this one, one card in your hand plays on guard circle, you don't have to score, which is great. Because that means you can be, as aggressive in the early game, spam the ever living hell out of everything that isn't a grade 3. And then when your opponent eventually counterattacks you, PG, middle finger them, you're great. This deck has a lot of deck stacking ability. If you play like me at some point, you're probably going to end up discarding a PG either for Generous Flute or for other stupid reasons, just because you really want to see triggers. But either way though, Aegis Meyer is a very solid PG to have. You can run Kalson, the Bringer of Protection. You can run Paladinium Zeal Dragon, because they all have the exact same skill. I choose to make it Aegis Meyer because Aegis Meyer came out with the original Hexaorb, and while the original Hexaorb is no longer here, Aquamarine is technically the original Hexaorb in Spirit, at least on the Vanguard circle, so 4 of Aegis Meyer for that reason. On to our last grade 1 in the deck, 1 of in the red deck, none in the main deck, of Tier Square Sorceress. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto road pump and Pentagleam, counter boss 1, draw a card. Okay, not an amazing on road opponent skill, but I mean, hey, it's a free draw, and she's a sorceress, so by default, she procs both of these bastards' abilities off, so that's fair. And then auto rear guard once per turn, when your draft check reveals a trigger unit, counter boss 1, choose opponents from a rear guard circle and bot deck it. Or from a rear guard, not from a rear guard circle, and bot deck it. So, all around pretty solid. I mean, you're not going to be able to call her, because there's no way to call from soul in this deck, and there's no way to call from drop in this deck, but I mean, if you found a way to do so, you can use the abilities to basically bot deck your opponent's rear guards, which is nice for a little bit more of the aggro. So I like having Tier Square Sorceress in the ride deck as a 1 of, none in the main deck. Again, you can really run whatever riding line you want, but I mean, you know, procs off abilities.
On to our grade 2s, run 4 copies of Quadra Sorceress. Grade 2 and step 5 Shield, 10k base, auto 1 placed on rearguard circle with Vanguard Sorceress, check top 2, put them at the top and then you order and soul charge 1. Okay, all around pretty solid. Unlike the other one, she doesn't add anything to your hand, but you get to swap their order if one of them's a trigger and one of them's not, and then you get to soul charge whatever the hell you want. I have had games where I flipped over 2 heal triggers from this, a heal and a crit, 2 crits. It's happened before. I think one time there was a front and a crit, but point is, as long as you don't see double triggers, hopefully preferably you see 1 trigger and 1 normal unit, then you get a free soul charge, which is great for literally your main way of attacking your opponent to death. So 4 of Quadra Cast, I really like her skill. She checks top's card, she gets to soul charge, and she's all around pretty solid. So 4 of. And the funny thing is, I used to hate her too. I don't remember why I used to hate her. I just remember I originally did not like her, and then slowly but surely she has become like my most favorite grade 2 to the point where, remember when I said that this deck was supposed to almost turn into Alt Mayo? It's because I run 4 grade 2s all at 4, and there's about to be 2 more I put in place of these 2, and the only reason I didn't is because I wanted, well, A, because I saw Generous Food was the thing, but also because I realized I didn't have a way to gain boosters in this deck, or at least not easily. So, yeah, 4 of Quadra Cast. In fact, I was about to cut her, and then I was like, you know what, I really like her a lot, to the point where I was willing to cut any of these 3 who I argue is better than her, simply because Quadra Cast has proven that she deserves to be in this deck. Anyways, 4 of her. Then we move on to 4 copies of Delta Append Sorceress. Oh, I thought you costed Soul Blast. Do you cost Soul Blast? Who the hell was I thinking costed Soul Blast in this deck? Okay, never mind, I'm crazy. Anyway, I mean, outside of, Aquamarine. Anyways, Delta Append Sorceress over here. Grade 2 and 5k shield, 10k base. Auto one placed on rearguard circle from the hand. If your Vanguard's a grade 3 guarded sorceress, counter boss 1, check top 2. Choose a card from among them, put it to your hand, and put the rest on the top or bottom. If you Persona Road, choose up to 1 critical trigger front trigger from your hand, reveal it, and put it to the top of your deck. All around pretty solid because she, again, stacks the top card of your deck. You can add 1 to the hand, and the other goes to top. Sad news is you have to add something to hand. So again, if you see 2 triggers, it sucks for you. But if you Persona Road that turn, you also get to stack a trigger to the top, which is all around pretty solid. So if you didn't end up having to get a crit or front for let's go, you can put it back on top, which is nice. And the only other downside is that she requires you to, have the grade 3 Greater Vanguard Sorceress in the card name, but again, she deck stacks, she adds to hand, it's only 1 CB to do it all, so I'm not against Delta Append. I do like her skill a lot, so I'm willing to give her the 4 for this one. Then we have 4 copies of Octaray Sorceress, who, when I saw her, I, immediately went, why have I not ran this before? And then I remembered, right, the original version of this deck had a CB problem, that's why. Anyways, Octaray Sorceress, and this deck still does have a CB problem, it just feels more manageable. Grade 2 and 5k shield, 10k base, auto and placed on rearguard circle, with Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater sorceress, again requiring the grade 3 or greater sorceress, but to be fair, half of the deck, including her, doesn't require the Vanguard to be at grade 3, so it's fair that 2 of them do. CB1, check top 2, choose up to 2 cards from among them, put them to your hand, put the rest at the top in any order, and if you put 2 cards into your hand, choose a card from your hand, put it to bottom. Okay, Octaray is one of my favorites of these deck stackers, and here's why. For a simple CB1, you either get 2 free hand cards, 1 to hand, 1 to top, or you just stack your top 2 cards, confirming that they are both triggers. And the best part is, if you do add something to hand, or if you do add 2 to hand, you get to send something to bottom, so if you have a way to shuffle your deck, you can recycle a trigger, ahem, wink wink, nudge nudge, or you can just send back a normal unit in case the top 2 cards are normal units. Pretty much she guarantees that you will drive check a trigger, or if she doesn't guarantee it, she gives you a lot easier of a time stacking triggers. So Octaray Sorceress is an amazing card for that skill alone, and then the second skill is kind of iffy, but I mean, it's so good. I don't know why it says auto, but that should be continuous. Continuous rearguard circle. When this unit attacks into anything, if your Persona Road this turn, she gets 5,000 power for that turn. All-around pretty solid. She gets an extra 5k power for her battles. I wish it was auto, because then that means she'd be a 20k every single turn. But it's still pretty solid, grade 2 nonetheless. It's a 15k for its swings, well, Persona Road, then 25k for its swings, obviously. And also, again, has a really good deck stack ability that procs at any point once you hit to grade 3. So I really like her a lot. I think she's really good in this deck, and 4 of, and she's probably the reason why I started the Alt Mile thing. And we have 4 copies of Influke Wizard, so grade 2 and a 5k shield, 10k base, orange man over here, auto rearguard when this attacks into anything. If your Vanguard's a sorceress, again, one of the cards in this deck that doesn't require you to be at grade 3. I mean, obviously this one requires you to be at grade 2 to play, but if you find a way to superior call at grade 1 or even grade 0, well, there you go. Anyways, when it attacks into anything, if your Vanguard's a sorceress, check the top card, and basically, if your Vanguard's standing, you may put it to soul, otherwise it goes to top. So either swing with this before you swing with the Vanguard to get a free soul charge, or at least see if you want to put that card into soul, aka if it's not a trigger, soul charge it, or swing with the Vanguard first and at least like get a sneak peek to what your top card is to see how much you should guard that turn. Like if your opponent's going into grade 2 and it's a Persona ride and you don't have a Persona ride yet, you might want to just guard like hell so you can draw that Persona ride. And then auto rear guard when you drive check if there's a trigger, plus 5 as a power. This is really good, especially, you know, when you flip a Armati Nova and then just stack the 1 million to the other thing, and then the more drive checks you get, the more power Influent gets, and, you know, restanding it with Aquamarine, that's just pretty. So 4 of Influent Wizard, armor pretty solid, grade 2, stack the top card, possibly get you soul, and get you an extra 5k. In a deck that can restand him, he can always technically swing twice. So 4 of Influent Wizard, love to have this card in the deck, easy card. Then we have our last grade 2, one up in the red deck, none in the main deck, of Pentagleam Sorceress, grade 2 instead 5k shield, 10k base, auto put wrote upon by Hexaorb Sorceress. This does count as Hexaorb thanks to how her wording works. Check the top 3, put them at the top of the deck in any order. I always hated that skill because most of the time when I use that skill, I flip 3 normal units. But thanks to the additions of all of these bullshit grade 2s and this really one specific grade 1, I no longer have a problem with that because those top 3 cards will most likely just go into my hand and possibly make rear guard presence. So yeah, Pentagleam feels really good to have with that ride deck skill now. I used to hate it a lot and now I don't. And then auto, or you know, nowadays if I don't see those, I'll probably just see triggers and I'll take the 3 triggers. And then auto when placed on rear guard circle, look at the top card, put the top or bottom, if you put it to bottom, it gets 2k for the turn. That'll never go off. Again, if you found a way to call from soul or soul blast it and then call from drop, you could use that skill, but you don't really need it to because we have much better deck stackers in literally every other regard. But again, being able to stack the top 3 and either guarantee you triple triggers for that turn, or double triggers technically, or basically set it up perfectly for an all-out rush attack, quote unquote, then you're good to go. So I like having Pentagleam as a 1-up in the ride deck, none in the main deck. Also, one more thing I liked about this deck is back in set 2, like OG set 2 for D, the one that came out for Arena Urger and the likes of them, that deck, when it had Diaglass Sorceress, felt the most consistent to me outside of this one because it was able to pump out rear guards consistently, and I like having full boards. Every other build of Hexaorb outside of that one never felt like I could make a full board consistently without losing all of my defense and then dying on the next turn. This deck feels like the Diaglass deck from set 2, aka it feels like I can still make a board, be aggressive, and still keep myself alive for at least a Persona ride turn. So I really like how this deck has come out. If you can't tell, I really do like this deck, and that's rare for me to say because I don't like Hexaorb, so I really love how this deck turned out. Then we move on to one copy of Gratia's Gradule. I originally wasn't planning on running this, and then whoop-de-doo, I had one free spot in the deck, and let's go. So grade 3 normal order, regardless piece, you may have one regardless piece in your deck and use it a total of 1 time per fight. Last card of your Vanguard's a grade 3 with Persona Ride, and you do not ride this turn. Activate Persona Ride, aka draw a card, your entire form gets 10,000 power, and you regard as having Persona Ride. All around pretty solid because all of your Persona Ride based abilities, these 2 specifically, and of course Hexaorb herself, get to proc off, which means you have a total of 4 Persona Rides in your deck compared to just the 3 because, you know, you can only have up to 4 copies of a card between your main deck and your ride deck, and obviously one of these has to go in the ride deck. So all around, Gratia's Gauntlet is a very powerful order. I do like having it. It gives us a possible extra chance to get a Persona Ride off and trigger so many good effects. So I like having this as a 1-of. I mean, you only can have it as a 1-of anyway, so take that as you will. Then we move on to our normal unit grade 3s. 2 copies of Octave Veiled Sorceress, grade 3 Tunjai Persona, 13k base. I feel like I just turned British for a second. Someone slow that down, like, but when I started that sentence, and like until I said the word sorceress, because I swear I had like a small British accent because I heard the S. Anyways, auto rear guard when you drive check if it's a trigger unit. If your Vanguard's a Hexaorb Sorceress, retire her and counter charge 1 or soul charge 1. Again, I used to hate her because her ability that required both cost for Hexaorb, because OG Hexaorb required both CB and soul for her skills, and everything else also required CB and soul for their skills. It was balanced between their costs, but there's so many of them that costed it that it caused a problem to where I wish it said and but A. In this case, I found it because most of the time you are going to pick CC because, you know, a lot of these guys counterblast, mainly these 2, but it does add up, especially because you're constantly aggroing, and maybe even Henagon too. But if there are cases where you need to soul charge because, you know, you are spamming this skill literally every turn to its max potential because you are consistently seeing double triggers, you're good. Like, it rarely happens to me that I will see double triggers. I'll typically see 1, maybe I'll see 2, but in the games that I see double triggers, if I don't see Quadracast, I'm gonna have a lot of soul problems, like going after that first grade 3 turn, because I'm gonna have struggle to try to like, get my restands up. So 2 of Octavo, again, most of the time you see her for CC, but on occasion you will use her for soul charge as well. Onto our last card in the deck, 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the ride deck of this grade 3 that has single-handedly made me love Hexaorb so much, along with the entirety of this grade 2 line, which I swear I had to, like, it's been so long since I've had to, like, sit down and genuinely think to myself, should I, like, go all in on something? And I was just like, fuck it, let's go for the all-in grade 3s. Anyways, 3 of in the main deck, 1 copy in the ride deck of our main grade 3, Hexaorb Sorceress Aquamarine with Indigo Revelation. Oh, that's what your thing says. Anyways, grade 3 to that persona, 13k base, continues Vanguard Circle. It's also regarded as Hexaorb Sorceress. So if you're wondering how the interaction would work, as she's placed on Vanguard Circle from ride deck, she will be considered Hexaorb Sorceress, so she will proc off Pentagleam skill. And again, she procs off any of these guys' skills too that require Hexaorb specifically. Though, to be fair, the only ones that do are Pentagleam and, what's it called? Pentagleam and Octadevote, so you're fine there. And then it continues Vanguard if you persona robe this turn. So either, you know, via normal means of just riding this or playing the order, you get to add 1 drive for the turn, so she has triple drive, which is great, and she gets all of your triggers get an extra 10,000 power on increase, which is great because that essentially was the benefit OG Hexaorb gave you, because OG Hexaorb differed from this one in the sense of if you Persona Road, it would get the extra drive, but you had to pay a CB1 and a Soul Blast to do so. And also the 10k was the inherent effect it already had, where you give 10k to anything, not just the unit that's getting the trigger. But hey, I mean, now your triggers are 20k and you get triple drive with a lot of ways to deck stack. So all around pretty solid. And then her final skill is Auto Vanguard, regardless of what grade the opponent's Vanguard is at, and regardless if you Persona Road or not this turn. When a trigger unit is revealed for your drive, check the battle this unit attack specifically. So don't try to BS this with Armor Tino. Trust me, that would be way too broken. You could Soul Blast 1, choose over rear guard, stand it. All around pretty solid. You could possibly get a board restand if you know you're going to see triple triggers by, or not board restand, but you know, swing with your rear guards, swing with one of them being boosted, and then restand all of your units. I did that one game, and it was by pure accident that I was able to restand that, considering I knew I had to dig through my entire deck, and I used up all of my deck thinners or all of my like deck searchers on cards that weren't triggers, so I didn't know what my next 3 cards were going to be. I just took a gamble and it really worked out. I didn't win, but I came close to it. Anyways, Aquamarine is a very solid grade 3. On Persona Ride turn, she's a 23k with triple drive who literally turns all of your triggers into 20k pluses, and my god, if you flip a front from that, that's even better than OG Hexaorb, because OG Hexaorb would only give that extra 10k to 1 unit. This one makes that front trigger give 20k to everyone. And then again, not to mention the fact that she can get you multi-attack as well, so Influent can swing before the Vanguard attack, see if it's a trigger, and then if it is or not, you know, send it to Soul or don't. And then Hexaorb swings, and then you restand the Egg Foot, so after that it can then stack, or not necessarily stack, but you get to see if you're going to pull a damage trigger next turn or not, so you know how you're going to guard the next few attacks. Either way though, Aquamarine, very solid grade 3 for the offense, very good for like setting up, and just really fits my playstyle a lot. And I love her art so much, because the other one looked too bulky for me, at least from this angle. She feels a little bit more skinnier, her clothes feel a little bit more flowy, and it's all around pretty solid. So 3 of the main deck, 1 of the ride deck. Not further ado, that's it for this one. I hope you all enjoy. All around this deck is very fun to play. I do love being able to get to grade 3 and aggro my opponent down with 5 attacks while they're at grade 2. Literally deck stack galore with my alt mile line of grade 2s. Again, I say this deck literally almost had a total of 28 grade 2s. In fact, in the original build, if we count the point where I stopped building for 5 minutes until I realized it, legitimately this deck had 28 grade 2s, no grade 1s outside of the PG, and then I looked at it and I was like, oh, I need grade 1s. So yeah, this deck can build a board, which is nice. It literally has so many different ways that can proc off before you even get to grade 3, which is something I love about this deck. And once you get to grade 3, so much more abilities activate on Persona Ride turns. This deck is the best. So I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, don't forget, and don't forget to stand up your Vanguards.